Last year, director Danny Boyle and writer Alex Garland returned to the world began by 28 days later after decades of dormancy, with the brutal and emotionally devastating 28 years later. Now, the story continues with 28 years later, The Bone Temple, also written by Garland and this time directed by Nia DaCosta and shot back-to-back with the first. Continuing the story of young Spike's survival on rage-infected Britain, and now taken in by the merry band of dang-ass freaks known as the Jimmies, it's a tale of hate and love, death and rebirth, salvation and damnation, and it's got some incredible tunes too. Does The Bone Temple help to turn this into a strong trilogy? Does Nia DaCosta match Danny Boyle's vision set up in the first 28 years? And is this a strong enough story on its own? The answer is yes. The Bone Temple is a bloody trip to hell and back that had me mesmerized. 28 years later, The Bone Temple, the second in a planned trilogy of films continuing the world of 28 Days Later, is written by Alex Garland, who co-created the original film with director Danny Boyle and returned to write the first 28 Years Later, and is directed by Nia DaCosta, best known for films like the Candyman reboot and The Marvels. Here, The Bone Temple picks up shortly after the end of the last film and sees young Spike, played by Alfie Williams, inducted into the crazed survivor group known as the Jimmies, led by Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal, played by Jack O'Connell. And their violent path across infected England leads them on a collision course with the returning Dr. Ian Kelson, Ray Fiennes, whose study of the rage virus and specifically the Alpha Samson, Chai Lewis Perry, have him on the cusp of a massive discovery. So first things first, you may or may not have seen my review last year on the first 28 Years Later, but I really loved that movie. And I know when 28 Years Later came out, it was kind of a divisive film because the marketing for that film very much set it up to be in the vein of 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, and the first act of 28 Years Later is definitely like that. It's a lot of survival and fighting with infected, and then it takes a pretty hard shift in the second act, and then the third act is really its own beast. Personally, for me, I loved it. It was something that I totally went on the ride with. I loved the emotional ups and downs. It was a roller coaster, and I found it to be very, very emotionally affecting. So I really loved 28 Years Later. And in preparation for watching the sequel, I rewatched it, and I liked it even more. For reference, if you follow me on Letterboxd or not, I originally gave 28 Years Later a 4 out of 5 stars. When I rewatched it, I bumped it up to 4.5 out of 5. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I think it's an awesome film, and I really, really love its vision, its style, the story, the characters, the emotional beats. It worked really well for me, and I actually found it as emotionally devastating on rewatch as I did the first time. And instead of crying in a theater, I just cried by myself at home. But I really loved it. So as a setup for your expectations for this film, I'm someone that loved the first one, and I love the original 28 Days Later. I don't like Weeks, but I also really loved The Bone Temple. After watching it for the first time, I would put it slightly below the first 28 years, but I thought it was really, really fantastic. It had a great story, really interesting focus. I thought that Nia DaCosta did a fantastic job of taking over from Boyle. And obviously you've got Boyle as the producer here. It was made in conjunction with the first one during this production. And obviously Garland wrote this one as well. So it's a cohesive vision all the way through. The filmmaking style is a little bit different. It's not shot on iPhones like the first 28 years. So it's a little bit different. But it is a fantastic watch. I love the story. We won't get into spoilers until a little bit later. I will clearly mark them. But there were really amazing performances throughout this film, and I thought that it was brutal. It was bloody. There were some scenes for me that were actually even hard to watch, but ultimately was really satisfying, very enjoyable, and it goes into some really dark places, but it lifts you back up. This isn't really a spoiler. But the trajectory, I would say, of the first 28 Years film is this, cautious travel into the unknown and a sort of discovery of this world alongside Spike, who goes to the mainland for the first time in that. And ultimately, that is a story about a boy's growth, his journey, and his decisions for his own life, finding some independence and choosing what he wants, and then his relationships with his mother and father. And it's very much split between those two relationships. And but it gets darker. It ends on a satisfying but a darker note, especially the final couple minutes, which set up this film. Whereas I think that The Bone Temple is a movie that starts dark, descends further into darkness, and then raises you out of that, and has a great hook for what will hopefully come next in the third and the capper of this trilogy. I know they already have a vision. I believe they've been greenlit, and they're writing it right now, I think. Maybe they'll shoot it this year, we'll see. And in that way, it is almost feel good at times. There's many moments that were very joyful in this movie, were joyful for me, were emotional, not as emotional as the last one, not devastating in the same way, but emotional and complexities of emotions in this film that I really resonated with. I think it speaks to Nia DaCosta's strengths as a director, that there are many scenes that balance multiple tones at the same time. Without too many spoilers right now, there's a reason why I have the Number of the Beast record in the background. There is a scene involving this record, and specifically the title track, that is essentially the climax of this movie. And it is funny, it's exciting and thrilling, it is there's a fantastic performance, and it's also a little silly. You're on the edge of your seat wondering if, what's going to happen. There's stakes, and it's all happening at the same time, and I felt it all happening all at once. And that, to me, is the sign of great direction, great acting, great script, all together, great editing, brought together for really great cinematography, fantastic. All this brought together encapsulates the film. I thought it was really interesting that this movie, instead of going larger than the last one, sort of narrowed down its focus a bit. There's really just a few locations that were really focused on, whereas the last film had more of a journey to it. Here, obviously, we're focused on Dr. Kelson's Bone Temple and what he's doing in this monument to the dead. And it's a split film. You have Spike with the Jimmies, and then you have Dr. Kelson with Samson, this alpha infected that he's been studying. Two sides of the story, and obviously, if you're just watching this film, you're going to anticipate that they're going to collide, and they do. And that is the tension of the film, and that brings us to the climax. But actually, the film keeps them separated for two of these three acts. What happens when they come together is actually fairly unexpected. I did not anticipate the film would go in the direction that it did, and how this climax would go and what it would sort of revolve around, which I found to be a really fascinating, interesting choice. These movies are unconventional. 28 Days Later is an unconventional film. It takes the tropes of zombie movies and turns them on their head, but it also approaches them in a different way. It's not just a straight, pure survival film. It's a journey, it's discovery, and it takes a major gear change in its third act as well, which is what each of these movies do. And what's fun is that they're really, really hard to anticipate. You would never predict that the last film would go where it did. You would not predict where this film goes where it did. But it's all anchored by some fantastic performances. Now, Spike is the character that is the through line throughout these movies. Obviously, this trilogy is about Spike's journey. I don't know where that will go, but this is about what happens to him. But this movie is really, really focused on Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal, the leader of the Jimmies, who's played by Jack O'Connell, who's this horrible villain, and then Dr. Kelson, played by Ralph Fiennes, who is this, do no harm arbiter of good, right? And their two approaches to life in this post-apocalyptic Britain are very different philosophies, grounded in very different experiences and worldviews, and how they define not just their outlook, but how they treat other people, how they treat Spike, and what they're trying to do in this world. And so Spike actually pretty much recedes in the focus of this movie. The beginning of the film has this intense focus on him in the opening scene. After that, he recedes a lot. He barely talks, I would say, for the first two acts of the movie. And then in the third act is sort of his return to the forefront of the film and the choices he makes and his experience. A lot of it is just him witnessing these horrors and these atrocities and how that affects him, the decisions that he makes. But he's very much like an observer for a lot of the movie, and I found that to be really a fascinating choice, that he's much less active of a participant than you might anticipate given the last film. But O'Connell and Fiennes are just so fantastic. They put on these amazing performances. As Jimmy Crystal, O'Connell is horrible, but he's very charismatic. You can see how he becomes this leader. You see him eventually as victim and victimizer. You don't have sympathy for him, but you begin to understand why he is the way he is and where he came from. And Fiennes as this, this man of science who wants to understand the infection, try to find some sort of cure for it possibly, but is also very broken from his experiences and does wild things and is unpredictable at times while still having a very good heart. There's another performance in here that I can't talk about in the non-spoiler section, because to say who it was would be to spoil developments in this film. But all to say, they ground this movie in these wonderful characters that you ultimately have to see collide. And when they do come together, they have some fantastic scenes together. And I love seeing these two characters and these two actors bounce off one another. Just so enjoyable. There's some great action in here. There's a lot of horror. This is a true horror movie. I think that in the last film, you never saw anyone actually get infected and go through that classic 28 days infection process. That happens in here, and it's horrifying. There's a lot of brutality. Like I said, there's one scene in here that just made my skin crawl. It was really hard. Graphic, but only in brief glimpses, but the understanding of what's happening was really, really horrifying. And in that, it makes sort of the fight back against our villains to be even more satisfying. It makes them scary, it makes them unpredictable, but you also kind of know what they're capable of. The Jimmies, now, again, regarding the last 28 years later, there were some people that found the very ending of the film to be off-putting, and I really enjoyed it. It really hooked me for the next one. Spike goes on this journey, the story is complete, and the last 2 minutes of the movie are the Jimmies coming in. They are essentially, these satanic Teletubby ninja cult members. And I know that's really weird, but it sort of makes sense once you understand where the leader, Jimmy Crystal, is coming from, where we see at the beginning of that movie who he is. There's more understanding sort of what he's doing in this one. And they're very dangerous. They're very scary. But with a few of them, we start to kind of understand who they are and what they're going through, what's scarred them and broken them too. And again, with Spike being part of this is really he's our eyes as we go through this part of the film. And on Dr. Kelson's half, there are some interesting developments with the infection and then what that means for the larger world of these movies, and leaves you with some questions about what's going to happen next. I never saw these films as necessarily bringing a close to this story, but we're just following more of one or two characters through this world and what their journey is. I don't think that there will be some conclusion in part 3 that's going to totally wrap up this whole 28 world and bring an end to infection or bring some sort of conclusive answers to the status of this world, but I found it to be really interesting. It was really unexpected and exciting developments that worked really well for me. But most of all, what I was really here for was what was going to happen to our main characters, Jimmy, Kelson, and Spike. And I found this movie to really, really deliver extremely well on their arcs and their decisions. And I loved it. Also, alongside, like I said, the Number of the Beast sequence here, there's quite a few different needle drops that I absolutely loved in this movie. There's a bit of a setup with Kelson having a record player. So in that, it sets up why these songs are playing, but it's done super well. Obviously, Garland and Boyle and DaCosta knew exactly what they wanted to do with this in the film. And I felt like they really brought some great emotion and some unique feelings to this movie. Personally, this isn't really a spoiler, it's just a song choice. Duran Duran's Ordinary World is played in this film, and that's one of my favorite songs of all time. I was just thrilled when that song started. I was not expecting that, and man, it made me so excited and happy and emotional, and the scenes that it played over were totally unexpected, and I did not see the film going the way that it did, with the characters doing what they're doing, and it was beautiful, so beautiful. There's a Radiohead song as well, and really smart, interesting needle drops that aren't just there to sort of spike your emotions or nostalgia, but provide an interesting layer of contrast to the story and underline it, and I felt like it was so well done. And again, this is a movie where it's balancing a lot of different emotions and ideas at the same time. There's sequences here that can be really silly, and they're sort of meant to be ridiculous in some way. Everyone that lives in this world besides Spike has been, like emotionally damaged, mentally compromised by the insanity of living in this post-apocalyptic, rage-filled Britain. It's broken everyone, and everyone is broken in different ways, so the things that they do have some sort of insanity to them. It's just going to naturally happen. And do you go along with it? Do you find it to be ridiculous? Do you find it to be scary? Do you see the humanity and the emotions behind it? And I saw it all. I went on the complete ride with this film, just like the last one, and I found it to be so satisfying. I just went with it. So I watched this movie in a Regal theater, the one that I usually do by me, and they recently changed the seating into recliner seats, so they recline and they're comfy, and they also have this swivel sort of table that you can put in front of you for like a drink or food or whatever. And for a lot of the movie, I was sitting back and a little bit reclined and relaxing, and I would say by the third act, some point in the third act, I'd leaned totally forward and I was gripping the table with both hands, just like totally locked in, just really like feeling this film. It really got me. I thought it was a fantastic experience. Again, not the same emotional highs as the last one, but so satisfying, emotional in its own ways, and really beautiful and also ugly and disturbing. So before we get into spoilers, I would say 4 out of 5 stars for 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. I really enjoyed it. If you liked the last one, I think you're going to really like this one. This might even change your mind a bit on this series if you didn't care for the last one, because now that you sort of understand what these movies are going for, you go deeper into it and have a really intense focus. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. Again, DaCosta was an interesting director to be chosen for this. I didn't see her as the obvious choice, but she did an amazing job. And Boyle is supposed to take over for the third one again. But I hope that she has, something to do with the future of the series and has some role to play, because she did just such a great job here. I'm excited for whatever she does next now. I've been a little mixed on her in the past, but this was amazing. So let's get into spoilers. So there's 2 big spoilers here, or 2 big spoiler characters that I just want to touch on for a few minutes and give my thoughts. Now, previously I said that there was a character that was, I couldn't really talk about, an actor that I couldn't really talk about without giving some big spoilers away about where the story goes. And that's Chi Lewis Perry as Samson. Now, Samson, the character, was in the last one as, this raging alpha, the big physical threat that they needed to avoid, that Kelson was studying and drugging at times and then sparing because, he has this Hippocratic oath of do no harm. And I did not expect Samson to be such a huge part of this movie. And not only that, but for this to be a journey for him as well. So again, spoilers, but Kelson is drugging him, is trying to create this, relationship with him, a bond, and is slowly trying to see what he can do to help him recover from his infection. And it was totally unexpected. I was constantly like, this is going to go wrong. This isn't going to go anywhere. But by the end, Samson is talking. He's recovered some of his memories. He is sane again and is sort of, he still has the virus in him, has healed in some way. And I thought that was really cool. There's a brief split second where you see his vision, what he sees of other people as these raging monsters, which drive him. They create this threat from the psychosis that the rage virus creates, and that the virus itself, fills you with this anger, so you attack. And Kelson is drugging him with this morphine that's causing him to lower his rage, allow him to be peaceful and observe. Then he gives him some, they don't say exactly, but some sort of, antipsychotics that end up curing him, basically. I don't know what will happen. Is this character going to come back in the third one? Will we see more of his journey? Because I thought it was really interesting. We're just focused on him and his journey, and then we get glimpses of his memories on this train. He speaks. I don't have a ticket. When he says that, because he says moon, then he says, I don't have a ticket. And when he says that, I'm like, whoa, like something's happened. And then the infected attack him, and I thought he was going to die, and everything that happens with him was so cool. Just amazing. And then obviously he comes back around into Kelson's story at the end. He says, Kelson, thank you, which is everything that Kelson had said before. He had said earlier in the film, if I can just hear you speak a word, this will be all worth it. And I kind of was thinking this would be the end of Kelson's story, that he would die in this film. I was worried about that, and he does. But it's a peaceful end. It's a positive end for him. It couldn't really go any other way. And at the same time, he helps take out Jimmy Crystal, and the Jimmies are destroyed except for Jimmy Inc. It's Aaron Kellyman as Jimmy Inc., who's kind of our third or fourth most important character alongside Spike and Samson in this story, and she and Spike go off into their journey. But it was such a satisfying conclusion in some ways for Kelson's story, for the Jimmies, for Samson. I'd love to see what happens next. Obviously, they have plenty of things in mind. There's more to come with Spike. His story isn't finished yet. But it was really, really satisfying, and I love that. And Samson, Charlie Lewis Perry's performance has a huge spectrum, right? And just these small emotions in his face, small changes in demeanor, bits of physicality, say everything about the changes that he's going through. It was wonderful. He was amazing. He was amazing as this character, and I didn't expect that at all. And of course, also, like I mentioned, the Number of the Beast climax, where Kelson is pretending to be the devil and putting on this huge fire show in the Bone Temple, was awesome. Totally unexpected. I loved it. It's this huge, rock performance as the climax of your story, and it's funny and silly and cool and exciting. And it puts you on the edge of your seat about whether it's going to work or not. I loved it. So amazing. I would have never expected that to be the climax of a 28 film, but it was, and it worked. And it really says something about the unique focus of this trilogy, what it's trying to do, and again, why some people might not be entirely on board with it, because it's very different. And of course, the other big spoiler at the very end of the film is the return of Jim, played by Cillian Murphy. Everyone suspected this was coming. There had been talks about him being in this film in some sort of limited capacity, so I figured, the last movie ended with the introduction of the Jimmies, introducing this new threat, that this movie would end with the introduction of Jim. And was that going to be a positive or a negative for Spike and this story and where it's supposed to lead? And yes, it ends up being a positive. We cut to Jim. He has a daughter. I am speculating that it's a daughter with Selena, who is played by Naomi Harris in 28 Days Later. Is she alive? Is she dead? What happened to her? Don't know yet. I'm sure we'll find out in the next one. But he's teaching her history, and they're living in this cottage, which might be the cottage from the end of 28 Days Later. I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure they'll make that a little bit more clear in the third one. And they spot Jimmy Inc. and Spike running from infected. You don't know how long it's been since the last scene. Could be any amount of time. And they see them, and they decide to help. And boom, that's the end. Of course, we get In the House in a Heartbeat to close out the movie, and I think it's really exciting. I'm really excited to see where it goes. Jim will have his own story. I don't know what is going to happen. Obviously, it was clear that this movie, from the setup of the last one, was going to be this, Spike dealing with the Jimmies and what that's going to happen, and this danger. They were the threat. they're gone. Almost all of them are dead, and Jimmy Crystal has been given a very proper inverted crucifixion, and then his head was ripped off, and I love that for him. And I am excited for what's going to happen. I think it's going to be an entirely new direction. Where's it going to go? What's it going to say? What's it going to be about? Will we come back to the island? We have Spike's whole community and everyone left there, and his father, and some sort of resolution there, I'm sure, is going to be what happens. Like I said before, spoilers, I don't expect some sort of cure to infection, but with Samson, having a clear mind again, and I don't know where that's going to go. I'm interested to see if he comes back. I could see either way. I could see it going either way, and what that means for the rest of the infected. What is the threat? What is the major arc and confrontation? I don't know. I have no idea, and I think that's exciting. So again, fantastic film. Really loved it. As a fan of the first 28 Years Later, as a fan of 28 Days Later, as a fan of this movie, it is so strong. It is so good. It's so unexpected. It's visceral, brutal, but it's also hopeful, and I really found it to be a very satisfying film just in and of itself. It needs the last one to really set up the story, these characters and their dynamics, but as its own sequel within that, such a fantastic movie, and I'm excited for more. I'd love to hear your thoughts on 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, where you think this is going to go. I'm not sure where I would rank it right now. I would still put 28 Years Later at number 1, and this is like a really close number 2. Right around with Days. I don't know, with this and Days, pretty close. I always found that Days' third act is the weakest part of it, and I felt like this movie had no weak spots. Same with the last one, just very strong vision, consistent story, interesting characters, well done execution, scary, funny, hopeful, thought-provoking, all from start to finish. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, and I'm excited for more, and thanks for watching.